Hello friends, first of all, happy Valentine's Day. I prepared a special video for this day. Events happening in the world and their effect on love. The evolution of love. The development of love in cinema after cinema. It was an interesting research for me. I think it will be interesting to you too. Enjoy watching. Between 1000 and 1200, love varied in different geographies and cultures. The feudal system and Christianity were influential in Europe. The chivalric love troubadour poem was common. Family and hierarchy were important in the Middle East. Confucianism and Taoism were influential in Asia. Love was a theme in romantic poetry and literature. Between 1300 and 1400, Christianity emphasized that love was linked to the love of God. Platonic love came to the fore under the influence of religion. The love and rules of chivalry emerged and spread. Marriages were mostly prearranged for economic reasons. Among the people, economic solutions that served utilitarian purposes came first. Between 1500 and 1600, marriages were made for family and economic interests. It was usually arranged in advance. Love came after economic and social status was in the second plan. Class differences were an obstacle to love. The church viewed outward love as a sin. Romantic ideals flourished in literature and art. The position of women was difficult. Between 1700 and 1800, romantic ideals and emotional expression increased. Marriages were often made for social status and economy. Class differences affected love. Women had to express their feelings secretly. Between 1800 and 1900, the idea of romantic love became popular. Emotional love has become more important in marriages. Class differences and gender roles affected people's love lives. Divorce was rare and frowned upon. 1910s and 1920s, World War I, the Russian Revolution, the Spanish flu, the sinking of the Titanic, the Treaty of Versailles. Economic uncertainties and famine after the First World War led to postponement of romance and marriage. Social changes such as women's suffrage brought gender roles and romantic relationships into question. Romanticism literature remained popular, but the traumas and despair caused by the war were also reflected in literature. It was the era of silent films. It was the golden age of silent films. Despite economic hardships, romantic films provided audiences with a source of escape and hope. The traumas caused by the war brought into question concepts such as trust and loyalty in romantic relationships. Charlot and Carmen is a 1915 American film that is a parody of the opera Carmen. A seductive gypsy woman is sent to influence a foolish officer into allowing a smuggling operation. Smugglers land. Their leader sends the gypsy Carmen to lure Don Jose so he can bring the contraband into town. Charlie Chaplin plays the officer here. (1920s and 1930s), the independence of Egypt, the discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb, the discovery of penicillin, the rise of fascism in Europe, the establishment of our republic. The dominance of Republicans in America. Following World War I was a period of enthusiasm and innovation known as the Roaring Twenties. This also led to liberation in romantic relationships and openness to new experiences. It was a period of artistic and economic fluctuations amid the ruins of war and the rise of new regimes. The mid-1920s saw an economic revival, Jazz Age. The Great Depression, which started in the USA in 1929, affected the whole world. Millions of people became unemployed, poverty and hunger increased. Sunrise, A Song of Two Humans. It is a 1927 American film that won the Oscars for Best Picture and Best Actress. An urban woman, vacationing in the countryside, has an affair with a young, married local farmer and convinces the man to kill his wife and move to the big city with her. The man plans an accident on the boat he and his wife will take to the city, but the farmer, whose conscience does not allow him to do so, falls in love with his wife again. 1930s and 1940s sandstorms called the Dirty Thirties in America that caused 5-year drought. The effects of the Great Depression continued, causing many problems such as an increase in unemployment, a decrease in production and poverty. The rise of totalitarian ideologies such as fascism and Nazism led to political tensions in Europe and other regions. Adolf Hitler's Nazi Party comes to power in Germany, and the Second World War begins. New art and cultural movements such as Art Deco, jazz music and Hollywood cinema gained popularity during this period. Love was once again overshadowed by war and hunger. The tragedy of lovers separated by war has been the subject of novels and movies. Rebecca, it is a 1940 American film that received 2 Oscar awards. A young woman, newly married and very much in love with her husband, is greatly disappointed when she finds out that she is not the first lady of the house after moving to her husband's mansion. Her husband's first wife, Rebecca, died mysteriously, but somehow the house still seems to be under her control, so much so that even the employees of the house do not see themselves as the ladies of the house. Although the young woman tries to make Rebecca accept herself by erasing her from the house and from her husband's mind, she will not be very successful. 1940s and 1950s World War II continued. Atomic bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The Cold War, a tense period between the United States and the Soviet Union, began. After the war, the United Nations was established to maintain peace and ensure international cooperation. There were significant developments in technology during this period. The discovery of nuclear energy and missile technologies has been a source of both hope and concern for humanity. In the post-war period, many countries experienced a period of rapid industrialization and economic growth. While the economy recovered rapidly in America, the economies of Europe and Asia were devastated. This period is considered the golden age of cinema history. In this period too, in the shadow of World War II and the Cold War, love and romance films offered audiences great solace and escape. Even though love was still overshadowed by war, it was somehow growing from somewhere. Casablanca is a 1942 American film. Point 2. Victor Laszlo, the leader of a legendary resistance organization in World War II, escapes from the German concentration camp and arrives in Casablanca. His goal is to take refuge in Lisbon and from there to the USA. But all their hopes rest on Rick, the owner of Casablanca's most famous nightclub. Rick is the only person with the necessary passports for the escape. However, Rick also has a reason for Victor to be captured or killed. Victor's wife Ilsa is Rick's great love, whom he once believed abandoned him and buried deep in his heart. 1950s and 1960s, the Cold War reached its peak, and political pressures such as the Korean War and McCarthyism affected art and literature. In the post-war period, prosperity increased and industrialization and consumption accelerated in the USA and Western Europe. However, problems such as poverty, colonialism, nationalism, independence struggles, coups, and civil wars continued in Asia, Africa and Latin America. Sputnik was launched into space, a period when traditional family values dominated. Along with traditional values, new ideas and trends also emerged. An idealized understanding of love was dominant in romantic love films and literary works. Genres such as fantasy and science fiction began to increase. The golden age of Hollywood. Popularity of genres such as musicals, westerns and romantic comedies. Economic prosperity led to a perspective focused on consumption and materialism in romantic films and literature. Emphasis was placed on the institution of family and marriage. Although the interest in cinema decreased with the widespread use of television, cinema continued to develop. Roman Holiday, which earned Audrey Hepburn the Best Actress award, tells the story of a modern-day princess who defies royal impositions and explores Rome alone. Here he meets an American journalist, Gregory Peck, who hides his journalist identity and pursues interesting stories. However, his plan falls apart when the two fall in love with each other. (1960s and 1970s). The Cold War continues. The Vietnam War. The rise of civil rights movements. It is a very active period, politically and socially. Berlin Wall built. Kennedy assassination. Moon landing. A period in which economic growth continues, but economic instability is also seen due to the increase in the cost of war and inflation. Traditional family values are being questioned, and there are changes in the understanding of love due to the influence of sexual liberation and feminism movements. The end of Hollywood's golden age, the rise of European cinema, the New Wave movement and the increase in experimental films, the rise of postmodern literature and the increase in experimental and absurd literary works. In addition to works that touch on political and social issues, the popularity of genres such as fantasy and science fiction, the rise of rock and roll music. Daytime beauty, Séverine Cerisy is a beautiful woman who lives in Paris, is seemingly happily married, and has everything. Séverine is cold towards her husband, Dr. Pierre-Jean Sorel, and it is even perceived that there is no physical relationship between them. However, storms are brewing in the soul of this cold blonde. Between 1970 and 1980, the Cold War continues, the Vietnam War ends, the Watergate scandal in the USA, the Iranian Revolution and the Soviet Union's invasion of Afghanistan, the 1973 oil crisis and subsequent economic recession, inflation is rising and unemployment is rising, the Chernobyl disaster, the Berlin Wall is coming down, the effects of the Vietnam War continue in literature and cinema, the traumas, protest movements and social changes caused by war are reflected in films and novels. Under the influence of the feminist movement, women's roles in love and relationships are being questioned. With the influence of sexual liberation and feminist movements, more individual and egalitarian approaches to the understanding of love are emerging. Non-traditional relationships and alternative lifestyles are starting to happen more. The popularity of science fiction, fantasy and adventure films is increasing. Last tango in Paris, while Jean continues her marriage preparations, she is also looking for a house to live in after she gets married. One day, while visiting a house she likes very much, she meets a very interesting and strange man. Paul is a man older than himself and different from all the men he knows. He cannot resist the attraction between them and they get together. Between the 1980s and 1990s, the final phase of the Cold War, the collapse of the Soviet Union and the end of communism's dominance in Europe. The conservative policies of Ronald Reagan dominate the USA. There is the space shuttle disaster, Black Monday, and economic recession in the early 1980s. But towards the end a period of growth begins again. Developments in technology and communication are accelerating. Science fiction and fantasy movies. Different movements stand out in European cinema. With the emergence of the AIDS epidemic, greater awareness of safety and responsibility in sexual relations comes to the fore. The emphasis on individuality and freedom continues, but new searches and values also emerge in family and romantic relationships. When Harry met Sally, those were the years when getting to know a person was as exciting as discovering the world. Although Harry and Sally studied at the University of Chicago together, they met only after graduation, when they were driving to New York in the same car. They chat for a long time on the road and come to the conclusion that a man and a woman cannot be just friends. When they arrive in New York, the two live their own lives, but they meet occasionally and talk to each other about what's going on. One day, Harry breaks up with his wife and Sally breaks up with her lover, and when they meet, a good friendship begins between them. The duo will make great efforts not to fall in love with each other anymore. Between the 1990s and 2000s, the end of the Cold War. A unipolar world order. The Soviet Union is disintegrating. Political and economic transformations in Eastern Europe. The Gulf War. Wars and ethnic conflicts in the Balkans. Oslo Peace Agreement. Death of Princess Diana. Founding of Google. The introduction of the Euro. The acceleration of globalization and the introduction of the Internet into our lives. The space station is being established. Movies like Star Wars and The Matrix are breaking box office records. Different trends stand out in European cinema. Non-fiction and autobiographies are becoming popular. With the spread of the internet and social media, virtual relationships and dating are increasing. More equality and respect are emphasized in family and romantic relationships. Different sexual orientations and identities are becoming more visible. You've got a message. Joe Fox is a boss who owns a chain of book markets. Kathleen Kelly is a small business owner trying to resist Fox's brutal competition with the small bookstore she runs. Destiny brings these two different people face to face on the internet. It is a very entertaining 1998 American romantic comedy film. Between 2000 and 2010, September 11th attacks and the fight against global terrorism. Iraq War and instability in the Middle East, 2008 financial crisis and global economic recession. Rising income inequality and social justice debates. Popularity and box office records of superhero movies. Popularity of dystopian and apocalyptic novels. Blog and social media. Internet and social media dating applications have led to changes in virtual relationships and communication styles. The struggle for same-sex marriage rights has been successful in many countries and social acceptance has gradually increased. There has been greater openness and diversity around sexuality and identity. Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, made in America in 2004. Joel Barish's ex-girlfriend Clementine has all her memories of their 2-year relationship erased from her mind with a mysterious medical intervention. Learning this, Joel gets very upset and has the same procedure done to himself. (2010s and 2020s, Arab Spring and changes in the Middle East. The number of people fleeing wars, conflicts and political persecution has increased, and the refugee crisis has become a global problem. The spread of smartphones and the development of mobile internet, the rise of the sharing economy, Uber, Airbnb, the effects of artificial intelligence and automation in the business world. Platforms such as Netflix and Mubi have changed movie-watching habits and made access to independent films easier. Polyamory and diversity of relationship styles. Online dating and dating apps have become a new trend in love and relationships. Theodore Twombly earns his living by writing handwritten letters, which have become something of a rarity in the near future. And in these years, computer programs now perform people's work. After divorcing his wife, Theodore starts living alone in an apartment and one day, (2020 and 2024's) COVID-19 pandemic, politics and economic fragility and global cooperation, economic recession and unemployment, inflation is increasing in many countries. The age of populist and nationalist leaders and tension in international relations. Russia's invasion of Ukraine has created a new security crisis in Europe. Climate change and environmental pollution concerns have accelerated the transition to green energy. Dystopian and science fiction novels have become popular due to concerns about the future. The pandemic has affected romantic relationships and family life differently, highlighting the importance of close relationships. The Worst Person in the World. It is a 2021 European black comedy drama film. It tells the complex and chaotic life of 29-year-old Julie, who lives in Oslo. Julie dropped out of medical school and turned to photography, but could not fully find herself in this field. At the same time, she works as a waiter in a cafe and has relationships with 2 different men. The film follows Julie's efforts to cope with these relationships and other challenges in her life. I see that the decisions made by bad people have prevented humanity from living humanely, but love has somehow survived despite everything. In this strange world where there are wars, hunger, injustice, it has always been able to raise its head like a rare flower. Even if for a very short time, it has smelled its beauty in the world. He tried to cover the evil like a silk cover. I see that if they leave people alone, love will prevail. I wish this evil would end and everyone would love each other.